Wondering how your mindset affects your life? How to bring more energy into your business and life? Millions of people around the world ask these same questions daily. You are in the right place. Learn practices that will help give your life the meaning and success you've been searching for. Welcome to the Charge Podcast, teaching you how to create habits around real goals every day. Practical life advice from those who made it. Here's your host, Gary Wilbers.
Happy New Year! We've started off 2021, and I hope you are ready to make it the year of you. What I mean by that is you decide each day the choices you make, so you determine your direction. Why do we use GPS or Google Maps? So we know we're headed in the right direction. Let's take control of our life this year and decide to design our life and not live by default. I can't thank you enough. We keep growing our podcast, and we're now in over 68 countries and all 50 states in the United States. Thank you for making the Charge Podcast, and thank you for sharing the podcast with others. We are starting off January of 2021 with some great guests on the Charge Podcast. Our guests this month share their expertise on how to handle stress and anxiety, looking to turn your business over by learning the systems of a successful succession plan, or living in your center to design your life with purpose. Or how about, do you need to create some strategies for financial planning to live a happier life? If you are feeling frustrated and stressed out with your professional or personal life, I know in each of these podcasts, the strategies that each guest shares can propel you to live a charged life in 2021. Chargers are committed to finding how each day they can make their life better by the willingness to learn, grow, and become the person they were meant to be. I think this quote I coined in my new book, Cultivate Positive Culture. Living your life by design allows you not to live it by default. You made a great choice in listening to this podcast. Remember, the podcast is named Charge after my mantra, create habits around real goals every day. Let's get recharged in this podcast to influence a positive culture so you can take simple positive actions each day. Are you ready? Welcome, Chargers. We're so glad you came back again this week for another great guest. I'm telling you, we've started out 2021 with some excellent guests, and I know we've got another one that you're really going to enjoy today. Mandy Barbee Lanier is with us, and she has an MA in economics and CCHT founder of Palladium Mind, which is a transformation and healing expert who has helped hundreds of clients across the globe overcome anxiousness and thrive in business, health, and life. By combining the power of imagery with the innate capabilities, she empowers men and women to regain a positive sense of control, transcend struggle, and enjoy everything more. Mandy's signature method is a natural result of certifications in clinical hypnotherapy, I'm going to mess that one up. There, I did it. Neurolinguistics and mind-body connection, intersecting with 15 years of leadership experience in 3 commercial industries in the U.S. military. She is obsessed with co-creating massive, lasting, and positive changes with others using practical actions and fun with natural techniques. Mandy, it is great to have you on the Charge Podcast. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Gary. Your energy is so infectious.
Well, thank you. I love sharing with the Chargers. And I tell you, your topic is so relevant because with it still being early in 2021, there's so much going on with the COVID. And I know this is going to be a very practical topic for our listeners, which I call Chargers. But before I go there, I ask every guest the same question. It's my mantra, charge, create habits around real goals every day. What habit or habits do you think has led to success in your life?
My favorite, I got a little preview of these questions, and of course I've listened to your show before, so I'm a little familiar with this, Gary. Thanks for asking. That habit for me, it's something subtle, which is the theme of like everything that I'm probably going to bring to folks today. You'll see this. It's like I'm a broken record, but it's checking in with yourself and really tuning into what's actually going on underneath. Because so much of what we do is automated for us. We're moving like in so many directions at once sometimes that everything that's automated has been relegated to the control of our subconscious. So just bringing our attention to what's actually going on there. Why did I react that way? And what do I really want out of this? That's a habit that has paid for itself so many, I would say, even millions of times over.
Well, I'm so glad you shared that because that's going to be fun to dive into. But I think it's always good to start back with where you think it's most practical. But, of course, bios share a little bit of that history. But
Mhm.
what kind of brought you from where you started to where you're at now to what you're doing? Share us your
Mhm.
story.
Yeah, I'm a kind of an interesting bird. I am very sensitive, but a lot of my early conditioning taught me the importance of um, achieving and accomplishing a lot. And I learned some really great practices and habits, and I just have some natural innate characteristics. Um, I think immediately of my father. He was such a driven and in a way competitive person, and I turned that competition, that love, that like real joy and playfulness about competing and expressing through action inward. And so I really compete with myself a lot. I pile a lot on my plate and I like to output a lot. I expect a lot of myself. And so, in a way, I think the seeds of me helping others heal and create massive, life changing, permanent, positive results in this subtle, loving, like joyful way, it's really kind of always been there. But my winding path brought me into the military. You can see like the desire to achieve or the desire to travel, to do, to serve, to give, like explore and experience, like all those things. I went into the military when I was 17. I went to the Air Force Academy. I graduated with honors, traveled abroad, studied abroad in multiple different exchanges. And then I found the most difficult job in the Air Force that I could choose. To me, because as an aircraft maintenance officer, you get to influence the lives of young and established, experienced airmen more than any other career field that you could choose. So I wanted to choose the path that I was going to be able to influence and impact the lives of as many people as possible with my good judgment. And I endeavored to do that for sure. And the flight line at Langley Air Force Base, working on the F-22s, was just a it was a nuts experience. It was very cool. So I did that for most of my 20s. And then I went in and I want to accomplish and achieve through corporate life in corporate America, but something just never really fit in. And the problem was because I wasn't doing those jobs out of the passion of my soul. I wasn't connected with my inner purpose at that point. I was trying to I was trying to find my value externally. And when you do that for so long, eventually there's a price that's paid. It's like the piper says, it's time for you to pay me.
Yeah.
And that was coming up in a lot of anxiety, like deep, dark, difficult depression and anxiety. And in my early 30s, I had to meet that head on. And this resource and the tool of imagery is the way that I transformed that in my life. So finally, it kind of hit me square between the eyes. I have a gift for this, and it's the most impactful way to create lasting change that I know of. So I'm obsessed, as that said in my bio, I'm obsessed with doing this with people.
Well, what a great story and kind of the variety of how you came to it and kind of really from experience. That's how we do find things that's there. And first off, let me be first to say thank you for
Hmm.
your service. I'm
Thank you.
sure being on the flight deck, like you said, some exhilarating experiences that you had there. But I think one of the things that let's just start with, because
Hmm.
everyone's been dealing with now, it's coming up on a year with COVID. And, we hear this word all the time that anxiety is so much more prevalent today than it was before. And if anything, this has just heightened it. So, how would you tell people? I'll just ask a very basic question, but how do you help people resolve anxiety daily? Because the thing is, people that have it, it doesn't come once in a while. it normally creeps up all the time. How can they help themselves?
Yeah. First, I think having a new lens or an understanding of what anxiety is and understanding that it is here to serve a purpose. A lot of times that information can be healing in and of itself. I can't share it all here, obviously, but there's a blog on my site and I go really, really, really deep. And I don't reference this very often, but if anybody's suffering and you want to learn exactly what I'm talking about when I say anxiety is a spectrum of the normal human emotional experience. It is a healthy thing to be experiencing occasionally, but as you mentioned, it's being talked about right now because so many people are like stuck in this trauma loop of anxiety, like every day, almost like this constant background noise. The purpose that anxiety is supposed to serve in a normal relationship where we're connected to our bodies is as a feedback loop to something that's out of place. And that blog goes really deep on it. And there's a lot of different references that you can find this information corroborated by other resources. Just like happiness can become mania or sadness can become depression. If it's there all the time and it's really strong, it's a problem. Same with anxiety. It doesn't mean it can't be healed. People just don't know how. The problem with anxiety or some of these chronic conditions of emotion is often that we don't know, and I'm doing this air quotes thing.
Yeah.
We feel like we don't know why it's happening. It's because the body's speaking to us in the language of the body, in the language of the subconscious. You know, there's feelings associated with anxiety. It's a tightness in the chest, even a pressure, a discomfort or nausea in the gut. You know what I mean? It can show up all these different ways. So that's the language of the subconscious. So if we can figure out how to listen to the message in the language of the subconscious, we'd be able to, just like if you're, I'm going to speak to you because you're a man, if your wife, like my husband, if I go out to my husband, I say, honey, would you turn the TV down? And I'm never that sweet, but we are really sweet to each other, but I'm like more abrupt, you know, I'm like, sweetheart, would you please TV down? We laugh about that. So he's like, yes, but he goes, sure, Mandy, but the TV volume just stays. And I go to the other room and I go, oh my God, babe, would you turn the TV down, please? And he goes, yeah. He's like, I hear you, but then the TV volume just stays high. And then I come back. Eventually, I'm going to be like screaming, or I'm going to be like, what do I need to do? That's what anxiety is doing to us through the body, because we're going, oh my gosh, that's uncomfortable. But we don't know how to respond and fix the reason it's happening. So imagery is one of the languages of the subconscious. Emotions, hormones, and imagery are some of the languages of the subconscious. That is why in the bio, we talk about using a person's innate capability for imagery to speak to and resolve the problem in its own language. It's really that easy.
Wow. I tell you, there's a lot there, but I think the one that I would really tell people is I'll come back to is, you know, are you listening to what your body's telling you? You know, because your body is speaking to you. And what a great way you frame that to be able to get them to really think about it. Go ahead and I think right now, and we'll share it later too, but share them your website. So if they do want to go there, don't go right now. Of course, you're in the middle of the podcast, but if you want to write it down, do. And then we'll have it in show notes too, make it easy for them to get to. Let's go ahead and share it right now.
Thank you. And I get really passionate about this stuff. And I think it's just sometimes because this information isn't being talked about a lot. And I really believe, my hope is that a listener can put this into motion right away and find, because this is an innate capability. And there's a lot of people selling things in this world, you know, and we're like, where do we turn? What do we do? Part of what I'm really, really passionate about is helping people to understand this is something that you already own the ability to do. There's definitely times for help, but it makes sense if you don't know how to put that into motion immediately, but know that it's your capability. And most anybody who's healing anything is using the same mechanism. So it's already yours. I think of it like open source.
Yeah.
it's your body owns it yourself. So that website, and thanks for the prompt, Gary. The website's palladiummind.com. And palladium, if you wonder how to spell that, it's one of the elements on the periodic table. It's in the platinum group, and it's highly lustrous, valuable, lightweight, malleable, and catalytic.
Whoa.
And so that is why I chose it as the name of my company.
That is cool. I'm glad you shared with why that's the name that it is. And remember, we'll have that in show notes. So if you can't find it, go to chargepodcast.com, click on there, and she's got some great blogs and some great information on her website. I was looking at it the other day, getting prepped and prepared for this podcast. Let's kind of go from there, Mandy, of really talking about what do you think some of the biggest threats to mental health in our society today is?
That's so funny. I just was speaking about this the other day. We speak into existence, don't we? Like I already said, I'm a broken record. And here we go. I just uttered these words, not Tuesday of this week. So, I believe that one of the biggest threats to mental health in developed countries, because I think what we can see is maybe this provides a lens that's useful for people too, maybe an aha. In developed countries, our challenges with health, I think, really do land squarely in a lot of mental health issues. Whereas in less developed countries, where there's more of a scarcity of basic resources and the basic needs for life being met, we are focused, we have purpose, we have a mission, we are focused on surviving. So some of these more existential problems maybe aren't as apparent when we're chasing for resources. And then that's the problem that I see in the world when people have that career that they chose and they went to college, they chose their degree, they wanted a family, now they've got kids and they're in the 2-bedroom, 1-bath, and it's like, wait a second, I'm not happy. That's a lonely place to be because you created this life, and I've been there before. And so it's just an interesting struggle because then you can, well, I have it better than anybody I know yourself to death and invalidate your experience. And I think my answer is twofold because that's what's always come to mind. But recently I started dipping into this other subject. The number one way I see people hurt themselves is by invalidating their own pain. By comparing it to somebody else's circumstances. And how can we be of service to anyone when we're discrediting our own struggle? We are taking ourselves out of the ring when we do that, and it is so harmful. And you can see the effects. And so if sometimes when we don't want to do for ourselves, I just offer, well, isn't that the reason why you're not showing up for others in the way that you expect yourself to with all these resources that you have? Is because you're beating yourself up so badly. So let's focus on that source of the problem. Let's focus on that root of the issue. And then the second way is when people struggle like this, I see a lot of experts in the mental health or wellness spaces and communities positioning themselves as authorities on the topic, propagating the information, the disinformation that resolving trauma through the body, healing and releasing these trauma loops in the body is not possible. And that is so harmful because if we have actually convinced ourselves that something isn't possible, we stop searching for answers and then we shift into this coping. And that's what I said the other day is that this is where we are divorced from our personal power. We decide, okay, well, that's a closed door. We're divorcing ourselves from our own personal power. So that is one of the biggest. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Because it goes back to really what you talked at the beginning of knowing thyself. We have to know what our body is telling us as we're doing there in each of those areas. So one of the things that becomes, kind of that, what is really the provider problem and how will our listeners really know someone they love has it? Because, they're seeing some of these challenges in others, but sometimes I think we have a challenge. Sometimes we're not very good at recognizing it because we're not in touch and in tune with others. We're too much tied in ourselves. But what do you see as the challenge there that we can help others?
Yeah, I was thinking about, I call it the provider's problem because someone who does have it all, like has it all but can't enjoy it. Oh, I feel like I've really spent a lot of time thinking about this because it's so subtle. I feel like it's so subtle and so nuanced, but so pervasive. And because there's shame around it, we don't talk about it. And it's a very individual experience that's not having a very obvious acute impact because everybody's just coping fine and trudging along and doing okay. But they're just degraded enough in mood and energy and happiness that like the impact that they could be making, it's like that low hanging fruit.
Yep.
That's not discussed. So if we could just heal that. So I spent a lot of time thinking about this really subtle thing, and I call it the provider's problem because I think it's when you've got everything and no external obvious reason to be unhappy. So you're telling yourself, I should be happy, but you're not. And if you can't even figure out why the heck you're unhappy, and if there's no good reason, if you're the reason, you're the problem of why you're unhappy, it's your fault, you're already deciding that in your own head with your own cognition. It's a way that you can use your consciousness and your attention to harm yourself in a very quiet, very subtle, but very important way. And so that I should be happy, but I'm not. I think that's the real culprit. And I think that just a huge part of my mission and what I came here to do, I've learned it as I've gone, but is to bring some light into that and really, really provide a tangible picture of why it's so harmful to invalidate your own pain. I say in my podcast, I just started it really recently, and I got to share that with you, Gary, before we got on. One of the most impactful things that came to me through that creative process was the clarity that my value is, I think when we make our pain matter, real joy becomes possible. But when we do not honor our own suffering, no matter how small, it's kind of like, oh man, I'm going to cry right now. The Dr. Seuss books, a who is a who, no matter how small or whatever. That's the wisdom.
Wow. I tell you right there is really, that becomes the key, is realizing that your pain does matter. I love that. And that's where you really identify and allow the joy to come. And with it being early in 2021, I know people are challenged in this, but you've got to find it within to be able to have that. And then you've talked about before, and you shared a little bit about this, but how can we use that imagery and those areas to really heal anxiety naturally within ourselves? We have to be able to recognize it. We've talked about that, but how can we really kind of help ourselves really move forward?
Yes, I'm seeing there's kind of like a tree of options here because I'm not a medical doctor and hypnotherapy is not a licensed profession. That's really important to notice because I like to stay right in my scope of practice.
Sure.
But for sure, I mean, happiness, anxiousness, sadness, these are all emotions. These are normal human experiences. So the arms of these trees, something you can ask yourself right now is, if you have not gotten some care, some medical care, or someone to help sort out how normal do what I think is normal really is? How normal is what I'm experiencing? How dangerous is what I'm experiencing? Get an expert involved and help if you're struggling. Make sure you're asking all the right people, inviting everyone into the picture to help you understand. Is this acute? Is this chronic? Is this, do I need a diagnosis? Do I need some medication as well? Because those all have places. And, I've gone there too. I think it's really important to draw all the resources in that are possible to do. So we're not depriving ourselves. Once again, validating our experience through our actions. So then once you have that taken care of, then you can look and say, there's two things that go on here. there's work that can be done or bring awareness into the body, kind of like amplifying a yoga practice or a meditation practice. These are passive, kind of very broad sweeping things we can do every day to bring the conscious and the subconscious closer together and to bring awareness to the body and what the body is speaking to us. But anybody who's suffered with really severe anxiety, I did yoga like yearly, like daily, weekly, hours a day for years. And it was helpful. It was a part of the journey, but it didn't unhitch my trauma loops. So situations that are ingrained in us, sometimes if we get fired from a job, if there's an abuse that happened, if there's something repetitive that was repeated to us over and over again for years, car accidents can do this. Bullying of children can loop these things in over the years. Understand the difference and give yourself the grace between I have this screaming, repetitive, chronic thing, like a fire alarm that needs to be reset. You're not going to talk yourself out of that. You need, like, you're going to go insane if you don't reset the fire alarm. That's what trauma does to us. That's where somebody like myself, just being level with people, I wouldn't say expect that you can unhitch that stuff just by meditating. It's going to take you a long time. And with that honesty, there's hope too. Because when people try to apply meditation and think that, why isn't it working for me after 2 months? And you've got major trauma going on and screaming at you, it can defeat you even further. And I've experienced that too, blaming myself. Why isn't this working for me? Because the whole world's telling you, oh, just try this. This will do it. Zen your way into beyond your abuse scenario,
Right.
bring in some acute resources for acute situations. And then what you can do in your own house is, for sure, like you said, Gary, bring more attention to what your body's speaking to you and listen. I'll tell you one more thing, this little nugget. Decoding what's going on with subconscious information. When we still our critical mind, when we rest our critical mind, subconscious information surfaces naturally.
Yeah.
So that can come through imagery, and it can come through body sensations. It can come through memories. It can come through emotions. So it can come a lot of different ways, and it'll be different for every person, but it's going to fill in the gaps when you quiet your critical thinking. And that is what trance is.
Well, I think that becomes the real key of slowing down enough. And I know some people have created that. They want to be able to do that, and they are challenged with that. And like you said, if it's trauma, you get the licensed professional, get the help that you need, but there are things that you can do. And one thing we've talked about a little bit is you brought it up about meditating. And I think too many people, they try it, but then, well, it didn't work for me. And you just mentioned why it's so important. We have to quiet the mind to allow us to really allow our body to speak to us, to allow it to speak to him. It's something that I've picked up over the years. And I'll be honest, I was not very good at it at the beginning. And I did that exact same thing. I tried it and then I stopped. And then the more research, I got into it more. So what can we help that person that maybe meditation would help them, that they struggle with it, to allow them to realize, to give themselves time to allow it to work for them?
Oh, I am so the right person to ask this question. I can help this person. I can't believe this came up because, of course, this is my gift. This is actually my gift, is when I laugh so much. I ask people this question as a playful joke. And I'm also kind of doing some market research all the time. I say, have you ever tried meditation? Inevitably, people say yes. And they say, well, how did you like it? And they go, yeah, it was hard. And I'm like, yeah, I know it's hard. It's really hard, because there's an easier way to do it. And this is a free thing on my site. And the reason that I'm so obsessed with imagery is because when we try to for one thing, people kind of hose themselves because their expectations are it's going to come quicker. And they think that if it's frustrating, because that's the judgment coming up. You're judging yourself already. There's already too much criticism in the picture. So meditation becomes another way to beat ourselves up. Oh my gosh, I suck at this. And so just know that everyone experiences this. It's so much so that I laugh about it. And when we laugh together, and I'm like, yeah, would you like to learn an easier way? Because we're trying to get our mind to be empty and quiet. Would you think that it's easier to give a kid a toy or to ask them just to be quiet, just to be totally still and quiet?
Give them the toy.
Give them the toy. Imagery is like a toy. So if we can occupy enough of those little whack-a-moles that pop up and distract, if we can give it something beautiful to focus on instead of something to worry about, that's kind of like what we're doing is we're substituting early on so you can start to control your own attention before you try to just arrest it and stop it and still it and empty it. That's like way too abrupt and hard. So there's a giveaway that's totally free on my site, and it's called, actually it's in the announcement bar, and anybody who goes there, but Gary, the free gift that we created for your listeners, there's like 3 free gifts on there on the page. Do you have that link up?
Yes, I do. I don't have it up, but I've got where, what site it is.
I'm the same way. I'm going to pull it up right now because it's my website, palladiummind.com.
Backslash
charge. Does it
hyphen
stop
gift
right there?
And we're going to have that in show notes.
Gift. Exactly. Yep. So you're going to find that there, folks. It's called accessing alpha. It's accessing alpha brainwaves the easy way. Imagery is way easier than trying to just completely quiet and empty the mind through meditation. And it is a form of meditation.
Well, and that's one thing Mandy has is she has those gifts for you. So we're going to have that in there because I know you may be writing or exercising or doing something active right now as you're listening to the podcast. So go to chargepodcast.com and she has that gift for us and you're able to access all that material that we talked about. Plus you'll be able to then check out our website. And we can't thank you enough for doing that for the Chargers of giving them the gift.
My pleasure.
So, Mandy, we're going to have to wrap up and go into the recharge round. Some great information, and I think some great information for people to really think about. How do they want to slow down this year? How do they want to kind of create the life that they want? And the thing I think that really came to me as we were discussing, we have the capability of doing it. But we have to look within ourselves. We have to understand ourselves better. And that's what Mandy is sharing with you. So Chargers, I hope you take the time to be able to do that. If you could tell them in 1 to 3 things that you would recommend them to do, Mandy, what would be those 1 to 3 things that you would suggest?
Oh, I'll tell one because I think this is enough. Look, it's so typical, right? You know, there's so many things going on in each of our individual lives. It's already so full. I think one of the gifts that I bring is an invitation to creating more space. Like in architecture, in art, in anything, white space is what creates the breath. It creates the movement. We don't think about that. We think about action as the movement. And white space, like you can research it. It's a concept. It's an important concept in any design. And so let's just think about one thing. And that one thing, we'll get meta here, is what can you take off your plate and where can you give yourself more rest? I have a personal burr in my I have like chap in my hide or whatever, like whatever you call it, about morning routines. Morning routines were another way that I beat myself up for years. Why can't I take a cold shower? I'm just like, all I want to do is be in bed. And it's because I had completely unrealistic expectations about what I was supposed to be doing with my day. And when I finally succumbed and gave myself a bit more rest, a tiny bit more space, my morning routine created itself. And it's one that's aligned and supports me to be optimally productive and happy. So maybe that will serve you too.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. Let's go to the recharge round. And I know you've got we'll kind of do these as rapid fire, but the first question is, they're kind of my framework that I speak about a lot, is how do you believe your mindset affects your daily living?
It affects everything. And I think forgiveness and bringing in a lens of forgiveness is the most impactful thing that we can do.
Excellent. What do you do daily to bring energy into your life?
I have a small creative practice that I do every day where I just really drop into the body and create and do something creative for just like 5 minutes. And it's something that I know I'm only doing for fun. And I actually really do look forward to it because I've created that space and it sets my day up right.
Okay. Excellent. Share the number one connection or relationship that's made the biggest impact on your life.
Mm, well, it would have to be my parents. It would have to be my parents. And I think that understanding that we are, oh, this is a good one. I know I had the questions in advance, but I think that understanding that even the challenges that relationships bring to us is exactly what we need to unlock everything else.
Mm.
When you can embody that and when you see that for yourself, it puts you out of struggle in key relationships and into a participation that is really, really healing in and of itself, but also a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah. Excellent. What advice has influenced you the most in your life?
I have to be a conversation with my sister when I finally made my mental health a priority, because in a moment, I was broke down crying because I'd spent years, every time someone said, "How are you?" I just felt like it wasn't an easy answer. And when I said that to her that night, and she said, "How are you?" We got on the phone and I just started crying. I was like, "I'm so tired of not having an easy answer for that question." She said, she checked in with me and then she said, "You need to make this a priority, like treat it like an emergency." And so that's a little deep, but that was the best. It was just like a wake up call. Like I got shook and awake,
Yeah.
and everything started to change when I treated that my pain like it was an emergency, like it was actually important.
Okay. Now, we talked about this because we both have stacks of books that we have not read yet. But what's your favorite book and why do you love it?
I I have a lot of favorite. I really do have a lot of favorite books, but I love, love, love. One of them is Endurance: The Incredible Journey of Shackleton to the Antarctic. It is a historical page turner.
Hmm.
It is amazing. And I've actually been to Antarctica. So there's that. And The Picture of Dorian Gray is by Oscar Wilde. And it is a very Faustian tale that was very influential over me. And it's dark and
Okay.
amazing.
Super. Now, last question. You almost made it through the recharge round. One sentence or less. Define the legacy you want to leave the world.
I want to help people to embrace acceptance of themselves first, and that will create ripple effects of impact of goodness to others.
Great. Well,
Radical self-acceptance.
you've definitely helped us today kind of embrace who we are and really look at 2021 about ourselves. What can we do? I loved your philosophy of the one thing of create more space, give yourself more time. It's kind of interesting you say that. That's one thing I'm doing this year. I'm a charger, so I like creating goals and really going after them. And this year I really reduced it down and told myself that I've really got three primary things that I want that to be, where normally it's 10, 12, and just trying to give myself that space to be able to move forward. Mandy, share with them again how they can reach out to you, and we'll have it in show notes. And then you also have the gift. We'll have that in show notes. So remember, chargers, we have that also available to you.
Yes, thank you guys so much for listening and hanging with us this long. Um, I I really do strive to share information that I think can be used and applied, because I know that there's just we are limited in our experience of time and space in these human bodies. And so it's a pleasure to share part of that journey with anyone listening. I'd love to connect. And if anyone that you know could use my assistance, there's a lot of really, really cool ways that can be accessed. And they're all right there on the site. My site again is palladiummind.com. I'm on Instagram at mypalladiummind. And my podcast is called Calm, Confident, and Deliriously Happy. And so I pour a lot of myself in there, and it's obviously free as well. So
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. And Chargers, I think you've got a lot to think about now, because the thing is, we've given you suggestions. Now it's up to you to decide what action are you going to take, because that becomes the real key to success. Remember, come back next week and we'll have another great guest for us. But check out Mandy's resources and all the information. We have all that in show notes at chargepodcast.com. Come back next week and we will talk some more. Make it a great day. We have our first sponsor of the Charge Podcast. We welcome Pulse Hit to our show, and we want you to check out their services. Most companies don't have time for a wellness program. Pulse Hit is your mobile turnkey wellness solution to guide your employees to a healthier lifestyle. Support your team in achieving their full potential so you can go back to running your business. Check them out on their website at PulseHit, PulseHiit.com, pulsehit.com. And if you can't check that out, go to our show notes at chargepodcast.com and we'll have you a link to their website. Thanks for joining me. Here we go.
This podcast is ended, but your life doesn't just stop. To continue your inspiring journey, head over to chargepodcast.com and access all the tools and resources mentioned on today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing with somebody who may also benefit from the advice provided. That's chargepodcast.com. Until next time, charge in business and life.